So we're at 7 o'clock. I'm going to share my screen to get our opening slide up there. People are joining. How do those look? Can you see a slide up there? I see thumbs up. That's great. So welcome everybody. This is our third session in our 3-part series of webinars focused on themes of building resilient communities. My name is Christine Vanderlan, and I'm a conservation and land use specialist with the Hudson River Estuary program, which is a special program in the Department of Environmental Conservation. And I work with municipalities in conservation planning and related land use initiatives. And the team that I'm part of is part of a partnership with Cornell University. So our series of meetings that we're culminating tonight, we've been working with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission and with Rensselaer County Cooperative Extension in offering these sessions. And we have folks from those organizations here tonight as well, who you'll get to maybe chat or converse with a little bit in a couple of moments. Our theme tonight is building local capacity for conservation. So we'll be looking at the roles and activities of conservation advisory councils and environmental commissions and similar kinds of committees around environmental themes, as well as climate smart task forces. And we'll also talk a little bit about some of the technical assistance and funding opportunities available through the Estuary program and through the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. We are hoping for some great dialogue with folks who are joining the meeting tonight, because learning from others who are engaged in work locally is really the best way to learn and maybe be inspired and hopefully find new approaches to challenges that you may also be experiencing in your community. I see folks are still joining, which is great. We have a little opening. So as you join, as others are joining over the next couple of minutes, we are going to ask you if you have handy a sheet of paper. Take a moment and a pen or pencil, crayon, whatever you have. Take a moment, plop your hand on it, and just trace around your hand. And we're going to come back to that at the end of the session. It'll just help us with a little exercise later on. If you don't have that, fine. Just jotting something down later on paper will work as well. But if you can, take a moment, trace your hand, have that handy for the rest of the meeting. And then take a moment and in the chat, introduce yourself to everybody and say your name, your community, your affiliation. So what kind of committee you might be involved in, if any, or department you're working with in your community. And if you would like, during the portion of the meeting a little later on, to give a few minutes of an overview of what you're working on in your community, what your climate smart committee is doing, what your conservation advisory council is doing these days. When you enter your name, also put presenter in there, okay? And we'll gather up all the folks' names who said yes, presenter, in their little introduction chat, and we'll be able to invite you to speak a little later on in the meeting. So I hope that makes sense. Hopefully the chat will start lighting up with folks saying where they're from and what their names are. We'll keep an eye on that and give you a couple of minutes, and folks are still joining. Which is great. Thank you all for taking your time to join us tonight and join in this conversation. I'm pausing a minute to give folks a chance to enter their introductions in the chat. And if folks are not ready to chat, discuss volunteer and say, yes, I want to talk about what our committee is doing later in the meeting. When we get to that point later in the meeting, also we'll give you a chance to raise your hand and join in, and we certainly will open up people's mics for discussion too at that time. So thanks, folks, for introducing yourselves. Others who are joining now, please also use the chat to say hi and let us know where you're joining from, what committee you're working with. Lauren, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Oertel. I'm the environmental planner with Capital District Regional Planning Commission. Excited to be here tonight and talk about what you all are doing, talk about the overview of CACs and what support we might be able to offer you.
And Penny and Bernie, do you want to introduce yourselves quickly too, while folks are still joining and adding their info in the chat?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I wrote this in the chat, but I am Penny Adler-Colvin. I'm also a conservation and land use specialist with the Hudson River Estuary program. Looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say tonight.
And I'm Bernie Wiesen. I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension, Rensselaer County. And I've had the good fortune to work with a couple of climate smart community task forces in Rensselaer County. And currently I am working on this project. I'm very fortunate with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission and DEC to pivot our roundtable, our environmental roundtable, to this format. So thank you everyone for taking time to join us.
Should we open up breakout rooms for folks to be able to have a little conversation? So Lauren is going to create breakout rooms, and we're going to take a few minutes to, meet face to face somebody else who has joined tonight. Oops. Not finding. Oh, I should probably give us an overall overview of what's coming before we do that. All right. So we have to kind of warm folks up, help folks feel comfortable, and hopefully sharing, and also make a connection with at least one or two other people kind of face to face. We're going to have quick breakout rooms for you to discuss a little topic, really kind of just to get folks talking and kind of get the juices flowing this evening. Then we're going to have a slide presentation focused on the roles of conservation advisory councils, climate smart task forces, and similar kinds of committees active in conservation in municipal government. And that will be brief, partly because we know folks are joining who participate in different kinds of committees, but this will hopefully give you a bit of background on what the other kinds of committees do. And so everybody sort of has the same basic understanding of kind of where these things come from and where they fit in local government as well, and kind of set the stage for hearing more from the folks who've joined tonight about the work they're doing in their communities. After that, we'll open it up for that kind of conversation about how folks are working in their communities, what the activities they're engaged in, and maybe depending on time and where the conversation is able to go, we might talk about some common challenges or some efforts that you are planning or starting to work on actively this year. After the general discussion, we're going to have a little more presentation just to cover and make sure folks are leaving with information about funding and technical assistance that's available both from the Hudson River Estuary Program and from the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. And of course, we'll also invite you to share other kinds of funding opportunities that you're familiar of that maybe others haven't found yet that can support the kind of activities that we're talking about tonight. And then we have a little closing, and we'll be wrapping up by 8:30. So that's the plan for this evening. We're going to now send you into breakouts for a quick conversation. And what we're suggesting you discuss is what does conservation mean to you? And my cats are there just because they're having some face-to-face time, and that's what we're hoping you get out of the next few moments.
All right, sending us off into groups of 2 or 3.
Hi, so everyone should be coming back to the main session, which is great. Hope you enjoyed having a few minutes to chat with folks one-on-one, or, in a smaller group. So I just want to see, am I still sharing my screen, or did that stop? Because
You are. Yep.
I am. So we've got a slide up there saying local capacity for conservation.
No.
No, that's
No,
not what's being
No, I
shown.
don't see anything. No, yeah, you're not sharing.
Hmm.
We don't see anything, Christine.
All
Someone
right.
has X-ray vision.
Now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm gonna, in the next, hopefully just 8 or so minutes, just give an overview of kind of the roles of conservation advisory councils, climate smart task forces. We have folks from environmental commissions and probably other kinds of committees here joining us tonight. And I'm going to focus on the Conservation Advisory Council, Climate Smart Task Force, environmental committees, focusing on these because they tend to have, their mission is really focused on challenges of climate change, of greenhouse gas mitigation, of conservation and environmental topics. And other kinds of committees also play a role for sure in conservation at the local level and are really integral to getting things done. That these committees have the charge, right, that has conservation built into it in one way or another. And I'm going to talk a little bit about their different kind of backgrounds, where they come from out of state legislation and their different roles. Partly so that folks, who serve on one or the other get a sense of what the background is on these other types of committees that maybe they don't have in their community. Circles are a little bit overlapping here on purpose because sometimes conservation advisory councils get charged with being the climate smart task force by their community, for efficiency maybe. Or you may have members that serve on both or all these kinds of committees. So there's definitely some potential overlap and sometimes considerable overlap, depending on how a community creates and appoints and what duties they give their different committees. So Conservation Advisory Council, this is an advisory body. So there's state legislation. The New York State General Municipal Law defines what a Conservation Advisory Council broadly is charged with doing. And their role is addressing development, the use of natural resources and stewardship of natural resources in the community, and environmental protection topics. It's a broad role. There's some specific things that municipalities and their CACs tend to pick up on and carry out, including keeping a lot of information in the form of natural resource inventories and maps, or maybe open space inventories about the significant open and natural areas in their community, their natural resources, wetlands, different types of sensitive areas. And so the Conservation Advisory Council has this background in state law. Some communities call their Conservation Advisory Council an environmental commission or a natural resource and environmental commission, or they may have a different name for it. But if it was created referring to this this state law and charged with this kind of mission, it is essentially a CAC, even though it might be operating under a different name in a particular community. CACs undertake a lot of different roles and activities, and I borrowed a little bit from different CAC websites and mission statements just to give a sense of the kinds of things that they do. So the Taconic CAC does general environmental education and works on stewardship of natural resources. The Town of Colony CAC maintains the town's open space inventory. It also gets involved in acquisition when the town is acquiring properties for conservation, and hosts a conservation day or assists in the town's conservation day. And the city of Kingston, again, also this natural resources mission. And I I've seen this fostering unified action in a couple of different mission statements from environmental commissions and CACs. And I think the idea here is that a CAC can work with the municipal, the town board, the planning board, multiple entities within local government to work toward a common approach and understanding around an issue or topic. So all of these kinds of roles are things that CACs take on. They really, and we'll probably get a sense of this if folks share their own work later in the meeting. The kinds of things they do can change over time. It can reflect what's most important or what topics and issues are really in front of a community at a given time. It can reflect, their work can reflect the makeup, who's on this committee, who's been appointed, and what they bring to the role. And it's a really flexible kind of advisory board, but just underline that they're advisory only. They do not have a regulatory role in the municipal government. Shifting over to climate smart task forces. So these come out of municipalities participating and wanting to participate in the state's climate smart communities program. And one of the mandatory actions for participating in this program is that you have a local task force as a kind of steering committee for the kinds of actions that the Climate Smart Communities program considers to be pledge actions and that the municipality is working its way through. Similar to a CAC, this task force is created by action, usually of the town or city or village legislative body, their board. And these also go by some different names, sometimes just a climate smart committee, sometimes just a climate committee, sometimes some other kind of name. And as I said before, sometimes a different committee is charged with being the climate smart task force as well. I wanted just to take a moment and recognize, there's other entities involved in conservation locally, and the Conservation Advisory Council, Climate Smart Committee, environmental committees can work with these other entities, and they have their individual roles. So kind of reiterating that conservation advisory councils, climate smart task forces, they really have this dedicated kind of mission. These other boards have their own dedicated mission, and conservation sort of touches on and may overlap with that, and they may do some really good work on conservation, but they really have a different focus and mission. So I'm not going to go through all these different roles of these different boards, but I just wanted to recognize that other kinds of local committees like natural resource committees, open space committees, they are creations of the city, town, or village board usually. And there's tons of flexibility and different variations of what those committees are charged with, what they actually do, what their makeup is, how people get appointed to them. So there's a lot of variety there. And then in some instances, the Conservation Advisory Council can actually be designated a conservation board, and that changes their role. It actually gives them an official role in reviewing applications in front of the planning board that touch on properties that have been listed in an open space index adopted by the community. So these are not as common as CACs, but we have some in our greater capital region. And I just wanted to mention that they take on a different role in the community, and there's some additional effort that the town or city has to go through to create a conservation board. Oops. And then at the local level, when we're thinking about local capacity for conservation, there are many different kinds of organizations out there that support and work on conservation and climate mitigation and resilience. So if you'd like to add some organizations into the chat that you're familiar of who are doing this kind of work locally, maybe some non-governmental organizations, maybe national ones that have local chapters, conservation groups, there's lots of different possibilities, as well as entities like soil and water conservation districts and others. So I just wanted to recognize that without presenting you with a big long list, but inviting folks to share some that they know of locally. Saratoga Plan. Yep. Land trusts. There are several working in our region, local, more like county level ones, to larger regional ones, to statewide. Sustainable Saratoga. Penny added Capital Region Prism. We heard from folks there last week talking about invasive species and native plants. Yeah. So in many instances, CACs, climate committees, are partnering with folks in other types of organizations or different kinds of technical assistance providers to get their work done as well. So I wanted to take a moment to, talking about building local capacity and these committees, certainly the people, the time, the energy, the passion that they're putting to the work that they do, that's a huge part of local capacity for conservation. And a lot of what they're doing is building and sharing knowledge and data and information and making that available to others to also use in decision making. And that's another component of local capacity that I wanted to touch on briefly, with just some examples of the kinds of things that come out of the work of these committees, including things like a natural resources inventory, which reports on the natural resources of a community, everything from water to soils to maybe scenic and historic areas, to areas that are important for wildlife and biodiversity, to areas important to farming. And natural resource inventories, in some cases, are presented in an online interactive map form, which is a terrific tool, making this information available to folks just through their web browser to go and explore and learn more about their neighborhood, about maybe even their property. Another example is open space plans, where taking natural resource information, engaging in dialogue with people in the community to understand their needs, wants, priorities, what they value in their open spaces, and formulating a plan that then can guide not just the municipal decision makers and planners, but also can help guide people who are engaging in, managing their lands, to undertake practices that recognize like the context for their own individual properties and the ways that they can support broader values in how they manage those lands. Some CACs and climate committees are creating online repositories of different reference documents and guides for landowners to take advantage of and to learn about management of natural resources or practices for climate resilience, or there's kind of a whole array of different kinds of information resources that I've seen CACs and other committees make available to people in their community to help them make decisions supportive of conservation or adaptation or resilience. And then, of course, the greenhouse gas inventories and action plans, which we heard a bit about through Neil, and we heard the regional effort in the first session. So I'm going to pause for a couple minutes just for any general questions about the different committees and what they do in their background before we turn and open it up to folks to talk a bit about what they're doing and have a bit of dialogue around the conservation work of these types of committees. So feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll kind of keep a lookout for those. And if we don't have questions, and I don't see the chat right now, so others who are monitoring or facilitating.
There is one thing
Thank you.
in there, Christine. I'm just scrolling down. This is actually, are there opportunities for youth to engage in this type of work from Penny Adler-Colvin?
Thanks for asking that. Yes, well, at least CACs, absolutely. The actual legislation, the state general municipal law that talks about CACs says that they can have up to 2 members, I think between the age of 18 and 21 or something like that. So they're looking for or making it possible for youth members to participate. And that's an option. It definitely takes effort to recruit and to also, I think, kind of accommodate the different schedules of young people in, for them to participate fully in the work of a conservation advisory council or another local committee. Their schedule might just be different than the folks who are already engaged and kind of have their scheduled meetings at a certain time and day. Transportation could also be another challenge for engaging youth, but absolutely it's possible. And I've also heard of some climate focused youth work being done in the lower Hudson Valley, though I don't know if that was officially linked up with a climate smart committee or municipal committee officially. They may have been doing more work sort of in parallel. But do others know of youth engaging in climate smart work?
Christine, I would add, just because I'm with Cornell Cooperative Extension, and of course we're home to 4-H. I do know that over the years we've had clubs form around environmental projects. It may not be as aligned here with the groups that you've described here today, but they certainly are opportunities for youth to kind of drive their own interests and come together and maybe do something independent of our structure and DEC and the committees we're talking about today. And there is a question from Laura Falk. I see a hand up. Laura?
I was just going to volunteer some information. In Saratoga Springs, the city and the task force has worked with students at Skidmore College fairly extensively. In fact, today we had presentations from 3 different students from Skidmore and 1 from Empire State College, who all had kind of semester-long projects around work that supported the task force. So they weren't permanent members of the task force, but they were a joy to work with, and I think it was mutually beneficial. So working with colleges can be a good option.
Yeah, that reminds me that there have been a couple of programs out of Cornell to pair graduate students in planning, or also out of the University of Albany to pair like a team of students in planning with a community to work on a specific challenge. And I think CDRPC has a youth planning initiative over the summer where young folks can engage and learn about planning in the region. Somewhat different focus, but.
Yeah, at CDRPC, we host a event every summer, I believe, typically in the summer, where it's a full day of activities to expose students to planning related issues, and it's supposed to inspire youth to get engaged with, their city and identify what they like about it, what's good, what's wrong, and what their role can be as they think about their next career or their career, their first career.
In the chat, Bob Brain has shared about the Greenagers in Chatham. And also Haley has put some comments in here about NYSERDA provides financial assistance for clean energy interns. And there's a link.
So I think we're going to move on to some more discussion at this point, which I called Capital Region Reports because I wasn't sure what else to call it. It makes it sound extra official, though. It's really not that official as a report. More an invitation to dialogue.
Yeah, so since no one put in the chat that they would like to, give an overview of what their organizations are doing, we can move on to the next slide where we have more of a small, it's a small group. So we have some prompt questions that we would love to learn from you and from things that you are doing in your community. So if you want to advance to the next slide.
Yeah, I was wondering if we want to give folks a chance now that we've kind of warmed up and gotten into the session a little bit. I know we asked at the top for people to indicate if they were planning to share something, but maybe if anyone wants to raise their hand at this point, give folks a chance. If you're interested in just saying, what community you're from, what entity you're working with there, and a couple of sentences or a couple of minutes even about what you're working on right now, or some success you've had. You could raise your hand. I see there's someone raising their hand like physically like this, which is great because we can't see everybody all at once. Using the little raise hand Zoom control will help us make sure we don't miss someone who's raising their hand there. But I saw Bob Brain physically raise his hand and Kate Butler has hers. So do we want to start with Bob and then move to Kate?
And then I think Kelly Jasinski after that.
Okay. So Bob, if you'd like to unmute Bob Brain, if I'm saying your last name right.
Here, sorry about that.
Great.
I'm not so good with Zoom stuff, just learning. But one of the things that we have going on here in Athens is, I don't even know when we'll get there. One of the things that we have going on in Athens is Scenic Hudson has purchased a former industrial building just south of the state boat launch. And there is a guy named Sam Merritt who runs the Apollonia. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but he's basically got a steel hulled or aluminum hulled sailboat that he's been running cargo back and forth, net zero to New York City, more as a symbolic, exercise. But he does move product, and he's proposing a school or a sort of nautical museum education center called Tides and Trades. And I was just thinking about that. It's only about less than a half a mile from our house here on Brick Row. And I was thinking about how the campus of that can be sort of reintegrated into the to try and renaturalize the shoreline to whatever degree you can, keeping it, resilient from flooding and so on. So that's one of the things that I'm involved with the Conservation Advisory Council here in Athens. We're trying to integrate. We got a grant as a tree city. We got a $500,000 grant to remove like 100 and some odd trees and to replant them. So we're thinking of taking those trees and milling them up and using them as material for boat repair and wood boat building instruction and so on. We're doing a sort of community day thing for Arbor Day as well. I'm going to be doing some wood cookie prints. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. You might be. If you do brain rot on short form video, you'll see people inking up cut trees and then printing them. And we're sort of going to be doing that as an activity at our table to try and get people to see that, all wood is different and that each thing has its sort of graphic signature that can be quite striking. But one other thing that, and this might be off topic, but just on the stretch of shoreline that's just to the east of Brick Row, used to be, it's a 19th century brownfield essentially that's grown over. There was a docks and the southern terminus of a railroad here, but we have this heartleaf plantain, which is very rare in New York. I think this is one of the only places it's found in this several 100-yard stretch here. And then I think there's one other spot where it's found in New York. But I always think about it's a beautiful thing. It looks like a Plantago Mayor, but it's an aquatic plant. And I always wonder if that can be used as a bit of a fulcrum to help preserve that one section in some measure. And that might be all I have to say for the moment.
It's great. Thanks, Bob. Kate, would you like to share next?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Kate, with the town of Chatham, and I serve on our Conservation Advisory Council. And currently we're working on doing an inventory map and learning how to use GSI. So we're sort of just getting started with that. Also, I just wanted to say to anybody else who is on any of these committees, we reached out to Hillsdale, I think. We've reached out to a lot of different communities, and I've found that those who have gone before us that have had success are so generous, and they'll come meet with your town. And of course, the estuary program's been totally awesome for our town too. So thank you. And then I also serve on our Climate Smart Committee, and we went to go achieve bronze status and try to get, points together so we could get some grant funding. And we're working on putting solar on some of the town buildings, getting heat pumps in our town buildings, and trying to do our part to decarbonize our town. So that's it.
Really awesome work. Thanks so much for sharing it.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting this.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to share? Kelly,
Yeah,
would you like to
yeah.
go? Yeah.
I have a few things I'd like to share and a few things I'd like to discover. That's why I'm on this today. So I'm from the town of Ballston, and I'm with the Green Communities Committee, which used to be the CEC committee. So we expanded our horizon, and we just recently, thank you very much, Haley, for your help, achieved bronze certification for climate smart communities. And it was quite a task. So we're taking a little bit of a breather, and we're going to regroup. Most of the remaining tasks that I think I would like to do would require a lot of cooperation with the town board and the different town departments. So I am already starting to reach out to see what might be something that I can get them on board with. Even simple things like maybe how we mow along our highways, so we're not going to be spreading invasive species any more than they already are. But I'm also a town board member, and as a town board member, I have the honor of working with the Ballston Lake Improvement Association. And we don't have an estuary, but we have this really unique, wonderful, very deep lake that has a huge wetland where that it feeds into. And it's been impacting because it's so healthy and full of beavers. We're currently trying to work with DEC on a solution to try and make it so that with all the rain that we've been getting, homeowners' properties are becoming an issue. And also the road is also getting flooded. So that's something that conservation is going to be a really big part of the picture for me, because as I inform them, I do care about homeowners, but I also care about a healthy wetland. So how to make that work, that's something we're going to be working towards. And then finally, I think I have a sit-down meeting in 3 weeks, if it's approved, on a solar roof installation that's going to be going on through grants that we achieved through our CEC program, and the town's going to be more than matching that grant to put a decent sized system on top. So I would encourage everybody to just keep plugging ahead, but I just really looking forward to I'm intrigued by this Conservation Advisory Committee. And I'd love to learn more about it. So if there's anybody here that wants to send me a message that they'd love to talk to me about what they're doing in that, so I can hear more about it, that would be awesome. Thank you.
I'll speak if no one else has their hand up.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Ann Dillenbeck, and I am a member of the Environmental Conservation Commission for the town of Clifton Park. And Kelly, I feel like I might have met you at the planning conference earlier this year. And we might have had a nice conversation about this part of Saratoga County. if it was you. Anyway, I'm a newish member of the Environmental Conservation Committee. I haven't served for a full year yet. I was sworn in January. I was a temporary member for about half a year before that. So we're a commission. So I guess, what do you have to say? I have to swear an oath of office to the town. It's appointed. I think what it is our CAC, now that I'm learning that there's a state charter for that type of organization. We sort of have a pretty straightforward charge. We meet when there are proposals before the planning board to comment on the impacts of those proposals as we see it from an environmental standpoint. We're our liaison with the town is the stormwater manager. And so there's a kind of a set group of things that we tend to comment on. And it is, it's wetlands, it's lighting, it's greenery. I was telling Christine a little bit about what we do. But the town of Clifton Park has, in the western part of the town, a unique set of zoning regulations that are adopted over 25 years ago, I think. Now, let me think about this. 2003, so 22 years ago. So intended to conserve the open space as much as possible in the town and the agricultural nature of this part of our town. We also have the only open space staff person I think in the state, something crazy like that, who is wonderful. And I know that there's many people in our town who work very hard towards the conservation of open space. And it's a hi Haley, nice to meet you too. It's something that everybody, I think,
trees is Athens planted.
Everybody who is in this space cares about open space. And it's when I see comments about new developments and they come up on Friends of Clifton Park, which is a Facebook group, you'll find the comments are overwhelmingly negative about new development. And yet here it is, this is a desirable place to live and work, and development is going to happen in Clifton Park. So the zoning guidelines that have been adopted, I think, do to some degree, it could be worse, but it could be better. And Christine and I were talking about this in the breakout room too. You kind of, I guess I come to, if you get 50% of what you wanted, you have to try to be happy with that. But, one of the things that I see that I wanted to talk about was that the state is rapidly embracing the electrification and the, enhancements to the grid and solar. But what in effect that's meant for us in the western part of Clifton Park is that the open space that was so carefully protected through the Western Clifton Park GIS and the zoning guidelines that were adopted 20 plus years ago have ended up making this part of town a target for large scale solar development, because here we have the open space, but we're also close to the electrical capacity that makes that work from an engineering standpoint. And so it's something that I think we're definitely sort of struggling with. And I'm hoping that we get a little bit more nuanced about how we evaluate whether projects are approved or not. It's very hard to see, it is a landowner's right to do what they want to with their lands, with private property rights, of course, but to see, a fully forested large tract of land, having the trees torn down in order to make room for solar, these are not farmlands, they're often forests. They might be secondary growth forests, they might be even more mature, but it's happening all over our town that we're seeing this type of development. And I think when the town had a 6-month moratorium on solar, this was quite a while ago now. And the idea was that there might be like 6 or 7 of these developments ultimately, but I think there's going to be way more than that. The other thing is the question about battery storage, which is essential to make solar work on an industrial scale in the Northeast. But what we're seeing across the country is that these battery storage facilities come with their own set of environmental risks. There have been fires, and we had a presentation to the town board, and the town has adopted a 6-month moratorium on the siting of battery storage facilities in conjunction with solar, because, and this was something that the ECC, proposed, was that the town wait before we allow large scale battery storage until we have a much better understanding of how our firefighting departments, which are largely volunteer, would actually handle that type of a fire. You can't actually put them out. You have to let them burn. And in the process of burning, which can take weeks for them to burn out, you know, you have all kinds of heavy metal and other types of drift being deposited on the land around that. So anyway, you know, it's kind of, we have these two things going on where we need to embrace the modernization, electrification, and move away from fossil fuels and do that as quickly as possible. And at the same time, we have to protect the resources that we have that are, you know, the environment around us and what that also offers. And I feel like I know that the state understands that, and yet I don't feel like it's being balanced particularly well because of the speed that all of this has to happen. So, and that's, I guess all I'll say about that right now. But anyway, thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, certainly is an issue, and hopefully our committees can do good work towards, you know, offsetting the damage that's being done in a lot of ways. Would anyone else like to share before we move on to the next conversation prompts? Maybe Christine, could you share your slides again, and we can pull up some specific questions that are often questions that we would like to see if anyone has answers to from their own experiences. You're muted, Christine.
Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Just one more click though to get the question up. Yeah. So if anyone would like to share one success your committee has had, oftentimes we can get caught on, you know, the issues and the bottlenecks, but we would love to hear one success to inspire us. No pressure on that, of course, just even if it's small. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
And share something, especially since Haley is here. So the city did earn about a little more than $87,000 in clean energy community last year. And just today, they took possession of another EV for the Saratoga Springs City fleet. So they're up to 3 now. And Haley helped us navigate that CEC application process. So just wanted to share that good news.
That's a great example of a success. Thank you for sharing it. And Bob, did you have one you wanted to mention?
I think that we got a grant to do a habitat mapping with Hudsonia recently, and I'm not 1,000,000% sure, but I think that it actually happened and that's happening. And a question I would have is, I'm new to my Conservation Advisory Council and new to these types of meetings and so on. But if there are a lot of sizable properties, and what you said about, you know, these solar plants coming in, and, you know, taking even a secondary growth forest has intricate relationships in amongst itself that do a tremendous amount of environmental services, of course. And, you know, to see 90 acres or something get cleared to, you know, to build a subdivision is tough to watch, you know. And I know that the RCAC doesn't have any teeth to prevent, you know, that kind of thing. But that's one of the reasons why I did join the CAC, to see if some of that can be mitigated a little bit. Some of that kind of, there's just surrounding where we live here, there's 90 acres across the street that's got a amazing secondary growth forest with tremendous amount of clay on there and a lot of cattail marshes that have set up inside the clearings in the forest. And then just to the south, there's 16 acres. And what's proposed there is a 110 unit tiny house park. And these kinds of ideas, they perplex me that people would want to use land that way. But that's one of the reasons why I joined.
Yeah.
Great. So.
Yeah, thank you. And then our next question, if anyone would like to answer it, what is one thing that has surprised you or one thing that you've learned by serving on your committees? I'm sure we've all learned a lot about politics, about a whole lot of different issues. Yeah, Kelly, go ahead.
I haven't been able to find the raise your hand button on my bottom, so I don't know why. Could
That's
be under
okay.
more.
No worries.
Nope. So I think the thing I've learned the most, it's been I'm in my 5th year of working on either CEC or climate smart communities. And I feel like I'm just starting. The world's an ever-changing place, and there's a little bit more urgency to what's going on. But when it seems like you're not getting anything done, that's the best time to just take one little thing and start there and get the ball rolling again. And you just have to keep persevering, and you can't give up. And you have to realize, as Kate said earlier, the success stories out there, they are so happy to talk with you. So if there's something you can't figure out, reach out to Haley, whoever your coordinator might be, to find out who has been successful and let that guide you forward.
Great advice. Thank you, Kelly. Kate?
Yeah, so definitely the politics. I learned about that. And human nature comes into play in this a lot of the times. But yeah, those other groups really are helpful, and they totally will talk to you. So don't be afraid to reach out, because we did that. Let's see, I've lost my train of thought now. Yeah, well, we went through this crazy zoning issue. I was just thinking about the tiny house community that I'm terrible with names, I'm sorry. The guy from Athens, sorry to be so rude. Yeah, we went through this horrible zoning war where they wanted to take all this beautiful land and like have little 2-acre lots everywhere. But I think we got through that. But I was just surprised that different people have different perspectives on how land should be used. And where do you find that balance? I think that's what our community is going through, like coming to consensus, and where do you find that balance to meet all the needs of solar energy? That's a big controversy in our town too. Housing, environment, where's that balance? So
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I think we just have time for maybe one more question until we move forward. We want to make sure we have time to discuss technical assistance and grants and all of the important things that will help you continue moving forward. But the next question would be, tell us one thing that you've done to recruit volunteers, and did it work? Oftentimes labor can be challenging to get work done. So what have you all done for it? Yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
We did one thing that we didn't plan on having this happen, and 2 of these people are actually on this webinar tonight. We did a newsletter and sent it out announcing our successes and what the town has done and what we're all about. And we've got some really wonderful members that are on the same planet as us that have joined.
That's great. newsletter is a good way. And Laura?
So for the last 2 years, the Climate Smart Task Force with the city's planning department have had a table at the Saratoga Sustainability Fair. So that's just been a really wonderful opportunity to even let people know that we exist, because I think a lot of community members don't even know that the city has a Climate Smart Task Force. So that's been great, and I guess I would recommend that to people if you have an opportunity to get out and do a table somewhere. That could be helpful.
Great. And Christine, do you agree to move forward, or is there one more question that maybe we want to go through?
I think we move.
Oh,
Someone
I
else
just wanted
had
to,
it.
I
Go
just wanted
ahead,
to
Ann.
ask Kelly how they got their newsletter out, because the other organization, which is a nonprofit that I work with, has been talking about sending a newsletter, but you know, this is a big town. Newsletters are very expensive. How mailing is completely out of the question from a cost standpoint. So how did you share your newsletter, Kelly?
Well,
Because
I
it's a
was
great
fortunate.
idea. Yeah.
I was fortunate enough that I begged for one for a long time at town board meetings, and there was a little bit of ARPA funds that were left. And since it was going to go to the whole town, we were able to mail it.
Wow.
So I don't know that we could do it again that way, but since as a result of that newsletter, the town board has finally been convinced that they need to put out a newsletter, and they are mailing it twice a year, and then they're doing it electronically twice a year. And our committee actually gets to put information in it now. So there are ways to mail. You can mail and drop the businesses, maybe just send it to the residences, you know, to cut costs on that. If you go to your local, I went to Mail and More, and it was treated as a bulk mailing. So we paid far less than what the town's doing to mail theirs out, because they haven't done that. I don't know why they haven't, but so there are ways to save on mailings significantly. Saved, you know, but I do get that it's a lot, but that's how I did it. That's how we
Well,
do it.
our town does, I think, a biannual mailing. I think they do like a pre-summer mailing with the information about the pool openings and parks and that kind of stuff. I wonder if that could be a place to piggyback, like a corner about, you know, conservation. Yeah.
Either that or just a suggestion. If it's only so many pages, the one stamp covers like up to 4 or 5 pages of information. So maybe you could see if you could just do the print out of the paper and insert with it. Okay, thanks.
Cool. Thank you.
Kate, is your hand new or old?
It's new. I was just
Okay,
gonna
great.
say, I found like there were a lot of people who signed up and volunteered and wanted to join our committees around 2020, like around COVID, because we had a lot of new residents or like after that period, and then it kind of came to a lull. But our town has, and I think they've had some success with it. We have an email blast that you can sign up for. And we also have a Facebook page. So when we've advertised for openings on committees, it's been relatively successful, even though it seems like it's slowed down a little bit for who wants to volunteer. So.
Thanks for sharing. Everyone, thanks for sharing the questions. Christina, one more question, or let's move forward?
Looking at the time, I think we have to move forward
I agree.
into technical assistance. Okay.
Great. So I will share a few examples of what Capital District Regional Planning Commission can offer you, and then Christine will do the same for her program. So our technical assistance program is wide-reaching, and it's free to any municipality within Albany, Rensselaer, Saratoga, and Schenectady. And it also applies to nonprofits in partnerships with municipalities too. We are able to offer any kind of small scale planning project and it could be for project development, which could support conservation environmental projects or any other projects within your community. We also do grant writing assistance for implementation funding to actually get those projects on the ground. And another big help that we do for communities is GIS mapping and data analysis for resources, identifying different resources and constraints. So just wanted to throw that out there. Some examples of what that might look like could be green infrastructure planning, open space conservation plans, trail and greenway mapping, which we've done in the past, climate vulnerability assessments. I don't know, you could think of something and likely we can do it for you. Our program is very flexible, so you're welcome to reach out to us at any time. My contact is in the bottom, but you'll also get an email at the end with my contact information, and we can talk through what your project idea is, but also please share this with your partners and your colleagues and anyone that you think might take, who could benefit from it. On top of our technical assistance program for small scale planning, we actually also do larger plans called drinking water source protection plans, DWSP2. It's a DEC DOH program where we identify the contaminants in a watershed for any drinking water source such as aquifer, reservoir, rivers, and we work with community stakeholders to identify the contaminants and then think about solutions and protection methods that can get on the ground. And we work with the community from the very beginning through implementation. And interrupt me if a question comes up. Does CDRPC work with Greene County? My program, the technical assistance for this, we do not. We're limited to Rensselaer, Saratoga, Schenectady, and Albany counties. But Haley, do you work with Greene County?
Yes, for our sustainability programs, so for the Climate Smart and Clean Energy Communities programs, we work with the 8-county REDC region, so from Warren and Washington all the way down to Columbia and Greene counties.
Yeah. So Haley is in my office, and we work parallel with each other and support one another, but we do have different regions. So if I'm not able to support you, then maybe Haley can find a solution to get you support in Greene County. And Christine, you can advance the slide. I just have a couple different examples of projects we have successfully done in the past. I think the first one actually Haley led, if I remember correctly. Oh, actually, I think we skipped one, Christine. Or am I on? Yeah, there we go. The Saratoga Greenbelt and Wilton Connector Trail. It happened in 2021. It was a study to find ways to connect the two communities together. Looking at land use, looking at transportation systems, environmental constraints, and they wanted to find a new trail alignment. So the goal was to connect Saratoga with the existing trail network to the town of Wilton. And ultimately, this project aimed to improve the access for people walking and biking by creating, a safer, more continuous and better connected trail system. And then you can skip to the next one, Christine. And yeah, and then the next one, also in 2021, was the Enhancing Green Space for Smarter Development for the Town of Colony. So as CDRPC, we worked with the Town of Colony to find ways like we can preserve and enhance the green space throughout the city and build on the goals that they outlined in their 2019 comprehensive plan. So in a way, it was holding them accountable to getting those comp plan recommendations on the ground. And our review focused mostly on couple different focus areas: strengthening the existing zoning and stormwater regulations, promoting the use of green infrastructure, and introducing a new tool that they hadn't explored before, which is the green area ratio. And some of these help to guide more sustainable site design into the future and the development as well. And some of the recommendations that came out of it were like new standards for tree protection, parking lot design, steep slope regulations to improve the site level conservation. And the proposals in the study addressed things like rooftop runoff, green roofs, vegetated channels to manage stormwater sustainably. And yeah, so these sound kind of big and scary, but or overwhelming more, but that's what CDRPC is able to help with, is kind of facilitate this whole planning process for a very tiny in-kind match, which just means the hours that the municipality puts in should be matched. And that's usually like providing data or meeting with us for project check-ins, things like that. So like I said, we're very flexible, whether it's conservation work or other needs that your community might need, but you're always welcome to reach out to me and see if your project applies, or even if you want to brainstorm projects together.
Great. I'm going to shift over now to talk about the grant opportunities and a little bit about technical assistance available through the Hudson River Estuary program. So if folks had tuned in on the first session a couple weeks ago, my colleague Neil Vitez was here, and he spoke a lot about ways that we work with municipalities on climate adaptation and climate resilience. I'm not going to get into all the different types of projects that are eligible for funding under an estuary program grant for that kind of work, but we do fund a lot of different activities that are related to your climate resilience, climate adaptation, vulnerability assessments, and mostly not on the greenhouse gas inventory mitigation side. That's not the kind of effort that this program funds, but more on the exploring resilience strategies for your communities and sustainable shorelines and that kind of thing. The funding for that kind of work and then the other types of projects listed here, it's all under this umbrella of local stewardship planning grants. So there's a request for applications that comes out about once a year for Hudson River Estuary Program local stewardship planning grants. And within that, there's a bunch of subcategories, and a lot of those are listed here. But it funds the kinds of local conservation planning efforts, such as the natural resource inventories, open space indexes and plans, other kinds of conservation plans, and then some more specific and focused development of local policies, like creating, setting the groundwork for establishing a new critical environmental area, or establishing a new conservation overlay in a community to protect a certain resource or area, and even to explore the feasibility of local conservation finance funding, which is a technical kind of study, but we can fund that kind of study as well. So this grant program, it's funded through the New York State Environmental Protection Fund, so it's state funding. The project period that you should plan on is about a 2-year project period. We don't fund projects that take longer than that. And a full request for applications gets released once each year. We don't know exactly when that's coming out, but we do anticipate that to be coming out this year. You can learn more. We recently hosted back in March and April some webinars exploring some of the specific categories of projects that are funded under this category, this local stewardship. So things like the watershed planning, the climate related planning, and also natural resources inventories and conservation plans. So you can find those webinar recordings here through this link on the slide. The conservation planning, that, those different project types that we protect all support this particular, or this framework for conservation planning that our program recommends and works with communities on. Even communities who aren't recipients of grants, if you are working on a conservation local planning effort in your community, say you are wondering about what a critical environmental area designation might mean, or whether that might be an appropriate tool in your community, and you want to learn more about that particular tool or about an overlay zone, we have the ability to provide some limited direct technical assistance to a municipality. Or if you are seeking to gather and understand different kinds of information about natural resources, we can provide some assistance with that. And the assistance we provide is all in support of communities who are at some stage of this kind of conservation planning process, either identifying what they have, taking, foundational steps to gather information that exists about natural resources and open space in their community. We can provide a habitat summary report for a municipality, pulling together information about known occurrences of species in the community, about what kinds of mapping may exist already about habitat types generally, about communities that have been identified through like the New York Natural Heritage Program as being significant natural communities, and whether those are present within your municipality. And so we can provide a brief habitat report, kind of pulling together information about wildlife and habitats, which might be useful depending on where you're at and what you're trying to do, but it's part of this foundational step of identifying what you have. And I think we've done that perhaps at one time for the town of Chatham, who's on tonight, prior to some of the more advanced conservation planning that the town undertook for later on. Prioritizing, setting priorities for open space and for conservation in your community, where you're analyzing that foundational information and you are working to understand what people care about, what topics are putting pressure on natural resources or open space in your community. We provide some support with that. Certainly our grant funded projects like open space plans, conservation plans are a great resource to try to access if you're doing that kind of planning, because that's a significant level of planning effort. If you're engaged in some kind of conservation planning and just are looking for some advice about, ways that different communities have gone about gathering information to inform their conservation or open space priorities, we can talk through from our experience what we've seen communities do, what kinds of tools they use, what kind of analysis they go through. We can provide some technical assistance and advice around those kinds of efforts. And then, wrapping up your priorities and information and identifying what actions you'll take and producing plans. We have reviewed draft plans for communities. We've reviewed draft comprehensive plans from a perspective of natural resource conservation, open space conservation, biodiversity, and that kind of thing. So if you're engaged in some kind of effort and feel like having some review from a perspective of conservation would be helpful, you can reach out to us and we might be able to give a review, have some discussion with you and others in your community around a particular plan or effort. Our conservation planning in the Hudson River Estuary Watershed website has basically it functions as a clearinghouse of information about conservation planning, and you can access examples of these kinds of projects and plans that many of which have been funded through the Estuary Grant Program. I do want to mention, because we have folks on tonight from more north of the capital region, or the area that we serve, that our estuary watershed boundary includes, in the greater capital region, it includes Albany and Rensselaer County, and it includes Columbia and Greene and counties to the south, but we don't include Saratoga County. We don't include Washington County. So the tidal portion of the Hudson River ends at Troy at the federal dam. So all the counties that border the Hudson south of that, in that tidal portion of the watershed, that's our service territory. And now I think we're ready for a wrap-up activity where we wanted to give folks a chance and sort of a little exercise way of sort of reflecting on the evening. But I see a hand up, so let me back up and pause, because definitely want to make sure we have time for questions or answer questions that people might have about the technical assistance and grant opportunities we covered, as well as if you know of any others that you think people really should know about, please do share that in the chat. But I see Kate has her hand up.
Yeah, so who would I talk to about developing conservation overlay zoning?
I can talk to you about that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Did I email you? I think I mean, you helped us
Sure.
with our community preservation plan, as did Ingrid, and you were wonderful. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, definitely reach out to me about that.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll pause a moment for questions before we move into our closing, just if anyone else does want to raise a hand, ask a question. Otherwise, if you get your piece of paper, if you did draw a tracing of your hand on a piece of paper at the beginning, if you get that piece of paper out, we will use that for our wrap up. So the idea is on each of your fingers on your tracing, you can write an answer to each of these questions or prompts. One thing that you're proud of in your community, start on something positive. One thing that you learned, right on the middle finger this evening. One question that you have, right? Not every question is likely to get answered tonight. Maybe you have questions, or as you're reflecting, come up with a question. One thing your community is working on for your pinky, and then one thing you will do, thinking ahead. So we'll take a few minutes for folks to do that. And just want to recognize the great participation that everybody brought tonight. We really appreciate the sharing that people have been willing to do. And I was part of a workshop where they had this kind of closing activity, but we left the little hand and the thing. And like a month later, they mailed it to us, particularly for us to see like, oh, did I do that thing I was going to do? So we're not going to do that, but you might tuck it away and pull it out and see, did you follow up on what you were thinking of or not?
Nice. Some folks might be still writing, but we are at time. So I just want to thank you all on behalf of Christine and all the other organizers of this webinar series for joining us. It's been a treat to hear your opinions and your ideas and learn from one another. So we will send out the slide deck PDF to everyone, as well as a link to the recording, which you're welcome to share with any other folks that you think might benefit from this information. And please keep us in mind, Christine and I, for any services we might be able to help you with, or just to have a conversation and brainstorm together. We're always happy. Thanks everyone for attending and participating.